Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Lessons of the Woods by 10 Point Whitetails. I'm your host, Dylan Porter. With me I have our co-host, Kyle Weber, and our special guest this week, Jason Say of Wired Outdoors. And Jason, you're from up in Pennsylvania, right?
That is correct.
So that's officially our furthest guest to the east at this time. We've gone south to Iowa, now we're moving out east. Jason's got a lot of stuff he does. He does a lot of consulting in various states in the area. So that's kind of where I'm going to leave it off here. But Kyle, we're going to let you jump in with questions unless, Jason, you got any further introduction you want to do for yourself.
No, I mean, I'll let you guys get started and ask away, and I'll do the best that I can. But some of your listeners out there are probably, I run a Facebook group called Food Plots for Whitetail. It has about 130,000 members on it. That's my group. I've been doing food plots for 15 years. Been fortunate to shoot some really good bucks. And like you said, Pennsylvania, which you don't hear, I've consistently shoot some big deer. The last 4 out of 5 years, I shot 154, 150, and this year I shot 165 inch. So, we talked a little bit about that before the podcast. It's nice. I always say to guys, it's nice when you have somebody telling you to do something, but then it's nice to know that they're killing deer too. So, so a lot of things, but I'll let you guys ask away. And if you have any specific questions on background stuff, ask away. I'm an open book.
Awesome. So the first thing I want to ask / talk about is listening to your podcast, Field Days. You talk a lot about what I would call micro food plots, micro plotting. You mentioned you have how many on your property?
I have 30. I have a couple different pieces, but one of them, it's like 500 acres on piece. I have 30 different food plots on it.
And none of them are bigger than an acre?
Well, I do have one it's a little over an acre, and the rest are all quarter acre, half acre size, maybe a 3/4 acre here and there. Yeah, okay. But most of them, I'd say the majority, you're looking at that quarter to half acre.
And so I love that because that's the strategy I've taken forward. I have on Wits End Ridge, which is the 90 acres that I own. It's big hardwoods and with a little bit of lowland, but it's big hardwoods with no agriculture, no ag, no destination food anywhere. And my tactic I decided to use is microplotting. I have one that's maybe 35 yards around. I have two, probably about that size. They're similar. But then I have a 3/4 acre food plot, which is the ridge top, which is my main food plot. But it's still I would consider a small food plot. It's 40 wide by 100 long. And that's all I have. But that's like the main food for a lot. Dylan has been on the property. He looked around and goes, "Where's the deer eat? What are the deer eating right now?" And I said, "Well, that's why the deer antlers are small, the deer bodies are small, and I don't have a lot of deer on the property is because lack of food." So how come, 30 plots, 500 acres is quite a bit to manage as that, but why did you do that strategy rather than one big 5-acre plot or?
Well, just the things I've found, my terrain's really rough. So sometimes it's just not feasible, right? And who wants to cut down big, mature hardwoods and things like that? So I've gotten really good. And I guess I'll just go back to your point and caution you on some things, and it doesn't sound like, so, I do a lot of consulting with people and they do, they hear me talk a lot about micro food plotting. The only thing I'd caution you when I do a lot of that is I do have a lot of ag around me, right? I have a high deer density. Okay. So if you're planting a lot of small plots and you have a high deer density, those plots aren't going to make it. So it sounds like you don't have a high deer density, but the goal is being that you attract and hold more deer. So you may have to really look on your property. And what I tell guys is you may need to have 1 or 2 destination sources, right? Like the bigger 2 to 3 acres that are going to take some of that pressure off. And I'll give you an example. I have a lease over on a timber company that I try and do the same things, and we're really limited. I could get 4 or 5 little tiny food plots, and I'm talking 1/8 of an acre food plots. I shot a nice 135, 140 inch, 4.5-year-old buck there 2 years ago, and the plots worked great. This year there was no acorns. So what did those deer do? Woof. I mean, they just wiped them out. There was no, and the deer were out of there. Like they were gone. There was no food to hold those deer. So, you know, when I talk to guys and a lot of guys talk to me about that, you know, when you do the micro plotting and use that, you do have to make something that can handle the browse pressure, right? It sounds like right now you just don't have a lot of deer. But as the deer start to move in and things, you know, and I'd encourage you to use exclusion cages to see how those plots did. You'll really be able to tell. Like you might say, oh, my plots didn't grow for squat. Well, no, it was the deer they mowed it down, you know. So I'd encourage you when you're testing that you know, theory and philosophy with no ag and nothing to eat around it. It scares me a little bit. It's like, oh man, I don't know if you'll have enough food for them that you'll be able to hold them all year long. You just might mow it down and they might be gone. But just a little something that I wanted to address when I was talking about that and with you going and doing that, just something to consider that you may need to eventually to put in a big 3-acre plot that's going to take some of that pressure off of those plots, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And actually, I mean, unfortunately you're limited by money and resources to clear. I'm going to have a forester out there this year. We're going to talk about some logging practices, some timber improvement, which may benefit opening it up. And I have plans. If I wanted to expand, I go north, I go east. You know, I already have that kind of in my brain to expand as much as possible. But at that point, it was, you know, money related was paying to clear 3 acres.
I get it. Yeah. I mean, I talk and I go see clients of all kinds. My favorite is when a guy says to me, I bought this for whitetail and whitetail owning. I don't give a crap about the timber. I got a bulldozer and I'm not afraid to use it. That's that's like my favorite thing. Is like, all right, let's get it done. But everybody has different means. They have different equipment that they have, you know, access to. So for some people like you, it's going to be more of a process, right? You know, it's going to be getting some things in. You're going to learn a lot of things, you know, and as it grows, you can build on those things that you learn. But I guess to your point, everybody is different in what they can and can't do. So
right. And my food plot got absolutely hammered this year. It was down to dirt. But for your what'd you call it, exclusion cage?
Yep.
So I did that. I actually fenced in my chestnut trees, but I still planted inside that so I could see what was coming up and where, you know, it's 8 inches tall. The turnips look this big. You know, I was like, that's what it's looking like. But out here, this is where the deer are eating. We took some promotional photos where Dylan took photos, and he made it look really good, but the food plot looked horrible. I mean, it was mowed down to absolutely nothing. Can't believe I hunted over it because they were still eating it, but there was just nothing.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to think about expanding, but you have to think about the deer herd. I mean, if I doubled my deer herd, so I have a total of 20 deer, the food plot was already being browsed over. What do I do then? And I know Dylan has a question regarding browse. So go ahead.
I got a neighbor.
Real quick, can I ask Kyle something just before we move on?
Yep.
So in your exclusion cage, it was really tall. Like you could tell how much was there. Like it was way taller. Yeah. And that's the nice thing. That's the nice thing with exclusion cages, because sometimes I go and I meet with a client and they're like, oh, my food plot didn't grow. And I'm like, are you sure? Or did the deer? Well, I don't really know, you know? So it's good that you did that. You really could see what the browse pressure was like on it.
And I'd love to say that I did it on purpose. Like, I'd love to say that I did that specifically to do that, but I'm standing in my food plot and I'm going to the left. I don't want to take a picture of it because it doesn't look good. It's not big, lush, and green, and I can see soil. But I look inside the fence and I go, take pictures of that because that looks really good. And you're like, well, what's the difference? Oh, deer, browse. You don't notice when they just take nibbles all the way through as they browse through your food plot, but it's significant. They eat a ton.
That's right. That's right. Yep. Yeah. So Dylan, you said you had a question on that then?
Yeah, I got a neighbor who's kind of in a similar situation as Kyle there, but he's got more deer. So he's got a 40 that is near town, near the golf course, but no ag. And I live in a predominantly ag area up here. It's ag, and then you'll hunt a 40 that's got a mile of field on each side that they plant and harvest. But he doesn't have that. He's got a lot of woods around him. And his deer aren't keeping up with his deer are keeping up with his food plots. He's probably got 30, 40 deer on that 40 acres. And him and I are both kind of wondering this. What is the best plot that you've seen that can keep up with browse? Is there one that's hardier? may not be the best for them, but grows faster.
I mean, clover, but you don't want your whole property in clover and chicory. I mean, I love Fusion Blend from Whitetail Institute. I use it's my favorite perennial blend. I love when I plant it with a nurse crop of oats. I'm a huge believer in that. I love diversity. I love diversity in all my plots. But when you talk browse pressure, I mean, that would be the first thing I would say that's, it's going to grow. And, but I've watched clover plots. If your deer, herd is that big, you got 30, 40 deer on his 40 acres. I mean, heck, you might get to a point that you can't plant anything big enough that it's just going to be gone. It's why you always hear there are certain things that, like soybeans do not, I don't plant a lot of soybeans myself because, like I said, all my plots are smaller plots. So I've never really played with them, but anybody will tell you, man, if you're going to plant soybeans, you better plant a lot because the deer, as soon as those tender, they'll come and they'll wipe them out. So, you have to make sure you plant a lot. So that's a lot of deer and, on a small piece of acreage, they're eating something though. Is he holding them all year long? Are they staying there all year long?
He's holding them a lot this winter. But he said during the summer, they kind of go away. What he'd really like is to just get them in there in October, for hunting season. And I don't know if that's necessarily such a feasible way to do it. I told him you got to plant some trees that are going to drop their fruits, that end of September to October.
Yeah. I mean, clover and stuff, again, I'm talking Pennsylvania, right? And I always tell guys from different states to take what one guy's doing in one state. But I think you guys probably both know, food plots here, I've shot my biggest bucks in the first week of season. Some of my easiest hunts, those deer have been on the food plots starting in September. They were patterned. I went in and I killed them that first week. And it's been a great way for me to hold and kill deer. But then we get into every year when those acorns drop, the food plots are done. They're done for 2 weeks. They're gone. They're going to lay. They're going to stand up and eat. They're going to lay back down. They actually eat acorns till they get sick. This year we didn't have acorns in Pennsylvania. My food plots all year long. And I got ag all around me, but I strategically set my food plots up at any time possible. It's a big deal for me is, can I get between the bedding and the destination, right? Can I get between where they're going, that they're going to come earlier, right? So when I can shoot them, because they're going to end up out in the destination, especially the bigger bucks, right at dark. So, man, all my property, I don't have any ag. I got ag surrounding me. I got all the cover. So, like, if you give me my choice and what I want in a piece of property, I walk in, it's like, yeah, man, I'll figure something out. Like, I'll take all that cover all day long, every day, and then get a bunch of food plots in between and stuff. But, like what you guys are talking about, when there's no ag and there's not a lot to eat, he's got a longer term problem. And I think you're exactly right. And plant some mass trees and things like that are going to, because your food plots are going to last, clover and stuff's all year long. Deer will eat clover here all through the winter. It's a great blend that will attract deer. But you get a real dry summer, clover struggles through the summer and stuff and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I love that. If I was going to pick one to withstand the browse pressure, that's it. And it might not even be enough based on the deer density and lack of ag around you, might not even be enough.
Yeah, I think he said he's 3 or 4 miles from the next big field.
Yeah, you guys are going to learn a lot of this. A lot of it's you're going to learn, right? And I learn every year, like this was one of the only years we didn't have acorns, and I saw 12 to 15 deer every single night, all archery season long. And that's never been that way. Beginning of season, yeah, man, gangbusters, acorns drop, they're gone. You see 1 or 2 deer a night, and then get close to the right, you start seeing those deer again. This year it was, man, that's a great year. Of course, I had to hunt 70 days to kill the buck because I screwed up on him the first day of archery and hit him and didn't get him. But that was my own fault. But you learn something every year on what you're, because like I told you about that timber lease, right? And I'm thinking, man, I got this figured out. I plant these 4 little plots and they do well and we shoot one early season. Well, this year we didn't have acorns and that stuff was gone before season even started, like it never even grew. So every year is different and you learn as you go. And that's the only thing I can say is but I think your idea of planting some apple trees, some chestnut trees, and things like that are definitely going to help them. It's more of a long-term solution to maybe hold those deer earlier in the season.
Yeah. And, when we talk about acorns, I had that happen to us this year was the opposite. We had the best acorn drop I think we've ever had. And for 2 to 3 weeks, the deer were gone. It was right after they went hard horned. I had a healthy bachelor group, 6 different bucks kind of sticking together, and I'd have them on trail camera every day. They were homebodies there. And all of a sudden, poof, they were gone. And for 3 weeks, I didn't have any antlers, any bucks, and I had nothing. And I was freaking out. Maybe they moved. Maybe I couldn't keep them here. And, they ran out of acorns, and then a few of them showed back up. Some of them went another way. And that's how I ended up with Ace, was because he came back to my property, which he must have felt safe. So, but we had a ton of acorns, and they were gone. So, but my food plot struggled because of the browse. And I don't have a big deer population. I had maybe 12, 15 deer routinely visiting, which compared to both of you, that's not much at all. But I browse was hard. So now this year, we're going to frost seed, which I think I think you enjoy it, frost seeding.
I do.
I'm going to try to do that this year with clover and chicory to help with the browse issue. So my question to you is this. Right now I'm under 4 feet of snow on my food plots. But I'm having the freeze thaw right now. 40s for highs, freezing for lows, 15, 20 degrees. But I can't frost seed at 4 feet of snow. So for other people, I'm going to ask you, and then I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. For other people, any recommendations? Let's say they don't even have 4 feet of snow. They're frost seeding. How can they do that?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in. I've never tried to frost seed in a lot of snow. Like, I've had people say, "Oh, it don't matter. You can," and I don't buy that. I feel like that snow, is the seed even getting down to the ground? I just don't trust it. Now, I have frost seeded many, many times. I had a guy the other day. It's always funny because you'll get guys who don't know you, and they'll come in the group, and I put a picture of some seed on my boots. It was snow, and the guy commented, "Oh, pissing in the wind, putting your seed down like that." And then I posted like 4 pictures of my frost seed plot. So I'm like, I got about a million pictures to say a different story. And he didn't say anything after that. But to me, a lot of people jump the gun. I see in February, like, because we always get that first thaw, and people are like, "Oh man, I got to get out and I got to frost seed," because it's all about the freezing and thawing and freezing and thawing. I'm more sold on the fact it's more about seed soil contact. It is, and I think you can frost seed with a little bit of snow on the ground, an inch, a couple inches. But for me, I wouldn't do it more than that. It just doesn't make sense to me. I know I've heard people say, "Oh, you can do it with," I've never tried that, so I can't say it doesn't work, but I don't really trust that. So what always has worked for me, I just got done frost seeding, and I watched people in my state that frost seeded a month ago, and I just kind of chuckle. I was like, I'm just gonna sit here and wait. And I think I did it, pretty much the perfect time. Had just a little wee bit of snow on the ground. Perfect time. It is freezing and thawing, but I've done it later. Where, we were out of that freeze and thaw, but nothing had sprouted yet. I think it's more important of getting in the ground, because you want that clover, because you're going to fight weeds, right? Like weeds are going to come up. So to me, you want to get that clover started so it can get up ahead of those weeds, right? And so to me, it's more seed soil contact than anything. And that can even be after the freeze thaw. But you don't want to go out there. And I see guys all the time, they'll ask, they think now frost seeding that they can just go out and do a hayfield that was in a hayfield the last 8 years. And they think, I'm just going to go out and put some seed and I'll have a great looking food plot. And they want to do the minimal amount of work possible. And it's like, that's not how it works. Right. And so for, as far as your answer and what I tell guys, I'm a firm believer. It's more getting some good seed soil contact. I think the freezing and thawing absolutely helps, but technically, I don't think you could call it frost seeding at that point, because there's many times where I miss that window and I just call it overseeding, or I went and just overseeded into bare dirt before everything got started and have had great success. So I think that answered your question of what you were looking for.
Yeah, and I like the statement of overseeding. So you can overseed your perennial plot, or reseed your perennial plot, or overseed it last year's annual. My food plot, in my opinion, last year was an annual. So I'm going to have, and it was beat up. Lots of soil exposed, lots of holes, lots of tear up from the deer. So once I get to it, once the 4 feet of snow is gone, I'm going to overseed with clover and chicory, and hopefully get that seed to ground contact, and hopefully have a beautiful browse tolerant food plot. That's my goal. And then I'll have food from here till hunting season, I hope. So
now I'll give you, and again, keep in mind this is Pennsylvania, but when you're talking about so I frost seed any annual that's set to rotate, right? So if I've planted an annual 2 years in a row, we need to rotate that. So any plot I have like that, I will frost seed that and attempt to establish that in the clover, because that saves me taking the disc in, taking my chisel plow, taking all the equipment. It's set to rotate. Like you said, I can have, browse all summer long and feed for them. But I found, like, when you do an annual plot, that frost seeding always works for an existing clover plot, right? It's going to make it more full. Like if it was really bad the year, it might not save it, but most of the times, frost seeding into an existing clover plot is going to be successful, going to fill in bare spots, it's going to make it more full. Frost seeding into an annual plot is a 50-60% roll of the dice, because you got to think there's a lot of variables. You haven't soil tested or limed or fertilized for that yet for clover. There's just a lot more things that can go wrong, but I have been successful about 50-60% of the time of doing that. And if I haven't, then it's set to rotate, then I didn't lose anything other than the seed that I put down, and I just replant it in the fall. Yeah. And what I say with clover and stuff, and I get that question a lot. People ask me, man, I want to have something in there now that the deer can eat all summer long. I used to kind of think the same way, but the thing I found here in the Northeast with perennials is trying to establish them. I used to think, oh man, I got these 30 food plots. Well, I can plant half of them in the spring and then get to the other half, and it'll be a lot easier. And I started doing that with all my perennials. Well, what I found was I did more work fighting weeds all summer long. I did more work. They didn't seem to establish as well as if I planted it in the fall for the next year, because you fight the drought of the summer that really a lot of times stunted that growth, and it wasn't established well enough in the spring that, man, it was just a constant battle. And I just found that for me, the sweet spot, if I ever need to plant a perennial plot from scratch, I'm going to plant that in the fall with a nurse crop of oats, and it's going to be better established for me going into the next year than what it was by planting that in the spring. Again, that's the Northeast, so it may be a little bit different for you, but I don't think we're that much different in climate and what we get as far as droughts and dry spells in the summer and stuff. So you'll find, man, it's great. We got this. Oh, we established it. It's growing. But now you're going to fight weeds, and you're going to need to spray them. As soon as that clover is 4 or 5 inches tall, you're going to need to hit it. I don't know if you used arrest and slay, but cleft and those kinds of things for broadleaf and things like that. You're going to need to spray it when it gets 4 or 5 inches tall, because you are going to be fighting weeds. Then I'm a huge proponent. I mow throughout the summer, and I might have to spray them one more time just to fight weeds based on what you're seeing. So when you're doing 30 plots like that ended up being a lot of work. And I'm like, you know what? If I'm planting it new, I'm just doing it in the fall. So,
yeah. So just to backtrack to what I'm going to do, I actually, when this posts, it'll be past tense, but I'm actually going to take a skid steer, park on the highway, and I'm going to plow my road into my parking spot, and then I'm going to plow up my little four-wheeler trail, and I'm going to try to remove 4 feet of snow with a skid steer. I'm going to try to get, down to a foot or down to 6 inches. It'll be packed because of the skid steer, but hopefully that sun melts it down, and I can get during the freeze-thaw phase, and I want to get that seed down, even though I'm going to have snowbanks, because I'm going to have snowbanks till May.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, I'm going to have snowbanks at my house and on my land in May. So
if
I wait till I can get there, I'm going to have a shorter growing season. You just mentioned that you're doing frost seeding now or have done it. I'm a month and a half away. So I'm going to try to expedite that with machinery, because I have that as a resource. I'm going to remove as much snow as possible, then let the sun do its thing. And when I get to a good freeze thaw, soil exposed situation, I'm going to get in there and frost seed with clover and chicory. So that's my tactic for that. But for the listeners that don't know, you mentioned arrest and slay. Yeah. I have used both of them, but if you can, with your experience, explain what both of them do to a clover chicory plot real quick, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So arrest and slay are they're not going to kill your clover. They're going to kill the weeds that are growing that are competing with your clover. So arrest is going to kill your grasses. And this is all I've ever used. There are, when I say this, everybody's like, oh, you can get it a lot cheaper. And what people need to understand, Whitetail Institute sells Arrest and Slay, and there are generic brands of those, but you have to buy them in like a gallon, right? Like you have to buy, and you don't need that much. Like Slay, for instance, which kills broadleaf, you need very little. So a lot of people have 2 or 3 plots. You can't have a gallon of that sitting in your garage. It loses its effectiveness over the years. So I always tell guys, yeah, man, it's because people are like, oh, they're ripping you off. They're really not. It's meant for the guy that has 2 or 3 plots, which is most guys that are like a quarter acre to a half acre. It's going to be more economical because you're just going to throw that stuff out because it's going to stop working for you. You know, nobody wants to store their chemicals in their house and temperature control or anything like that. So that's what is kind of behind that. But you have Arrest, which is going to kill grasses. So, and you can do these at the same time. You can mix them all at the same time. Slay is going to kill your broadleaf. If you go into your plot and you don't see any broadleaf weeds, then you don't need Slay. You know, you just need to see, oh, I got a bunch of grasses in here. So you're going to use Arrest. I always use a surfactant like the Surefire crop oil. People don't know what that is. That's going to make it stick. You're going to get a better burn on your stuff. But I'll mix that all in one sprayer, and I'll spray that clover plot when it gets 4 or 5 inches tall, you know, because you're going to need to, because eventually those weeds, especially when you're frost seeding and trying to establish it as a new plot, you are going to be fighting weeds for sure. So you need to get it sprayed at that 4 or 5 inch process just to maintain those weeds and make sure your clover has the best chance.
Yeah. So that's after you frost seed, and like you're saying, 4 or 5 inches, you treat it. I would call it treating the food plot. And then at what point do you mow? When do you look at that and go, I need to mow?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I'll go back as far as mowing and the spraying. So I'll tell a guy, let's say you have a food plot and you don't have any grasses or weeds or hardly any. Let's say you have very few grasses. Well, don't freak out, because you can manage those just with mowing, right? Like when you want to spray is when you see a significant amount of grasses and broadleaf showing up. That's like, hey, yeah, man, this is getting out of control. I need to spray this. But if you don't see that and you're seeing, hey, man, this is all, man, it's 90% clover, I wouldn't spray it. You can manage that with mowing, you know. And mowing, to me, I love mowing. Now, last year we had a drought, so people always ask me, when should I mow and how often should I mow? And that's an unbelievably subjective question, right? You know, it really depends. You do not want to mow your clover plots if they're stressed. If you don't have rain in the forecast, you do not want to mow your your clover plots. You want good rain in the forecast. You do not want to kill those clover plots. So for me, you know, last year we had a drought. I didn't mow my clover plots at all. The year before, I think I mowed them 4 or 5 times throughout the summer. So, you know, it is one of the best ways. And I enjoy mowing too, right? Like I actually, you know, for some guys I like, and I there are times where I had to learn to put my mower away and clearing stuff. Because one of the best things I learned with whitetails, just let stuff grow, man. Just let it get gnarly, let it grow, put that mower away. But with your clover plots, man, when they, you know, when they need mowed and you see those flowers, those flower heads starting to turn to the brown seed, that's the perfect time, you know, go in there and take the tops off. That's going to regerminate. I think mowing is even more effective at establishing and maintaining those clover plots than spraying them. It's just, you know, if you give me one thing, if I had to give up one or the other, I'd give up spraying before I'd give up mowing.
And in your podcast Field Days, which I've been listening to, you mentioned the fact that some people say, well, the deer eat weeds too. Deer don't know the difference, blah, blah, blah. But your point is, I have a 5 or 6 year old perennial plot that's doing great, and if you don't maintain it, yeah, you might be good for the first year, might be good for the second year, you might get 3 out of it. But if you want 5, 6 years on a return on your investment of that work, you got to maintain it.
I would say this, and this is in PA, we may be weedier than you guys. If I don't do anything to maintain that clover plot in a year, I'm getting a year out of it. Probably not 2. You know, because I always tell guys, and guys give me a hard time because they see my pictures, right? Like I have beautiful pictures of food plots, no weeds, and you'll see deer eat weeds too. Don't need to look like. I don't do that for pictures, right? Because it's like I say to every guy, what do weeds do? If you let weeds go and you don't care about weeds, then why don't you just mow and let a weed field grow? Well, you know what I'm saying? Like you can just get over once, you'll have a whole thing of weeds and a deer can eat it. We plant it because we want that stuff to grow. And what do weeds? Weeds compete with that. So yeah, you do not want weeds in your food plot. It's not about pretty pictures. And usually when I say it to the guy, he doesn't have much to say after that. But sometimes you got, and there's that whole thing. And I think it's just, you have a group of guys who want to put in minimal work, right, and think that they're doing it just as good as you are. And I never try and belittle a guy. I was like, hey, if your way's working, man, and you don't ever do anything and the deer are hammering your weeds, awesome. That's not how it works for me, you know. And for me, weed control is not about pictures. It is about, you planted that food plot for a reason, because what you planted, you want to grow. And what are weeds going to do? They're going to take over. They're going to compete with that. You don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's no, and that I love that, because, and I like your point about your food plots being half annual or half perennial, and you rotate, and you're kind of giving them a buffet of food to eat. And Dylan's point with having deer at his neighbors at the right time. Yeah, clover's there all year round. They can eat it. It ends for me around January when the snowpack's too deep. I mean, we're talking 2-3 feet, so they can't get down that far. They stop trying to dig that far. But if you can plant annuals that are maturing or ready during October when you're hunting, or during September when you're hunting, that you can do that with a perennial. Here's the food all year long, but here's an annual that's kind of timed out or targeted towards a specific time to be hunting. Or that's how I feel, at least.
Yeah. No, you made a great point. And we all know, like, we love hunters, right? We love talking hunting, but there's no more group that will rip each other apart if you don't do it their way, right? I mean, we destroy each other, and it drives me crazy, because there's different ways to be successful, and there's this whole new movement that the only way to plant a food plot and be responsible is to do it with a drill. Or the only way to plant a food plot is to do, and Jeff Sturgis is great, is to do the buckwheat and the crimping. And if you don't do that, you're a horrible steward of the land, and the soil's all going to die, and you're ruining everything. It's just not the case. There's different ways to do things and be very successful at it. And for me, I'm not going to get a drill to 90% of the plots that I do. It's just not feasible. The buckwheat method, rolling and crimping, I mean, that's a lot of spraying. That's multiple trips over and over. I plant a lot of food plots. I can't go do all that. So I'm not saying those methods aren't good and they do things, but I think you can accomplish the same thing in what you talked about. And you said, I'm a huge proponent of diversity. And people say, oh, you know, there's two main reasons for that. One is, if I could, people ask me all the time, hey, what's the best thing I can plant to kill one in the first week of October? Well, I have general things, but if I knew that answer, I'd be a billionaire, right? Like, you know, it's going to be different every year. And just like we talked about before, how different this year was for me with no acorns than it was every other year. I mean, the deer were eating my turnips, eating the brassicas themselves at the beginning of October this year. That has never happened before here, never. And so, like, you could never predict that or say it. So, like, for me, having a smorgasbord in that food plot for them, diversity, has always worked really well for me. But then even more importantly, you know, if I have a 1/4 acre plot or bigger, I love to plant it in sections, right? So I can put one section is in an annual, the other section is in a perennial. So for 2 years, we have annual on one side, perennial on the other. Then, you know, after 2 years, we got to rotate that into a perennial. So you might have the whole plot in a perennial for a year or two, but then in 4 or 5 years or 3 years, you can rotate that perennial side, and you're practicing good soil management. You're not beating that soil up that's in a perennial for 4 or 5 years. You're letting it go. That soil's doing great. Then you have an annual over here. You only do it for 2 years, and then you're in a perennial. That has worked great for me. And my soil, the same plots I've been planting for 15 years. If anybody will tell you, Pennsylvania soil, I'm planting on strip mine ground, that there was barely any topsoil. And people see my plots, and they're like, I practice good soil management. So there's different ways to do different things. And I feel like planting that diversity and planting in sections really has given me a way to be really responsible and not beating the heck out of my soil every year with a tiller and tilling it 5 times. And I tell guys that, you know, like, I learned my lesson with the tiller. I had some bad experiences, but they're effective if you use them right. You know, like, if you use them, like, I never tell guys, okay, you got a tiller, now you can't plant food plots because you're not being responsible, but you have to be careful on how you use it and stuff. So we get so hung up on this is the only way to do it, and you're a horrible person if you don't do it my way. And it's just not the way it is. And for me personally, practicing that good soil management, rotating those, that's been extremely effective.
And finding what works. Like, you have experience for this year when you had no acorns. If this was your first year doing it, you'd be rethinking how you did everything based on your food plot production and the deer browse not this year.
Yeah.
But years before that, having that experience of knowing acorns, you kind of meshed all that together and realized what works. Where I'm in my first year on the property, what I did, which was 3 different annuals, 3 different brands. I spread it out. I'm like, let's just see what kind of mess we can make. And I got to compare, and I went, okay, that worked, that didn't work. And the one that did work was right in front of the tree stand at 25 yards, right where I wanted to be. Now this year we're gonna okay, browse was too much. Let's replan that. Let's get some more browse tolerant food plots out there. So it's a process of learning it and learning specifically what your property, what your county, and what your region does. Just because something works for you doesn't mean it'll work for me. It doesn't mean it'll work for Dylan.
It doesn't mean it'll work across the road.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. And that's, and I think, you know, what guys need to understand, and that's one reason I say diversity, because even though I know a lot, I've hunted my particular property that I have, I've had it for like 11 years now. This year was completely different, but I was prepared for it, right? Because I had diversity in. I had diverse things. I can't tell you how many guys say to me, man, the deer hammered my brassicas. I'm planting everything in brassicas this year. And then it didn't work that way the next year, you know, because you can't really predict. So like, to me, like, it's, and you guys are 100% right in what I would say. And, you know, and you get in, and everybody's situations are different. I have a lot of land where, you know, diversity is always going to be the key for me. Like, I'm always going to plant a lot of different things. But when you have limited and you only have 3 plots that are getting mowed down, you might not have that option on some things. And what works for you is going to be different. But I'll always be, if you can get diversity in, man, you know, and I can't tell you how many guys I talked to that, man, the deer didn't touch my brassicas this year. And it's like, plant them again next year. And they might say, oh, they didn't hit them again. Do it again. Because once they do, and once they figure them out, man, it is like candy to them. It's like crack cocaine, and they will be all over it. But it might take you a year or two, and people are like, oh, you're full of it. But I lived it. I remember calling Whitetail Instant. I'm like, those deer didn't touch. I'd you know, basketball-sized turnips, and they ate the tops a little bit, and they're like, plant them next year. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, sometimes they got to figure it out. I go, man, I watch deer eating bark off a tree. You're telling me they can't figure out what a turnip is? And literally, like, the next year I planted them, and it was like clockwork, man. My buddy, we do flintlock muzzleloader hunting here, which is, you guys probably have never done it. We're the only idiots in the country that do it.
I haven't done it, but I watched a video on it, and I think it is the coolest thing ever.
It's I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do, but you just never know. My buddy missed the same deer 4 nights in a row with his flintlock muzzleloader that was coming to turnips. Like, it didn't even care. It was that much. But no, I mean, so, and I guess back to the original point is, it is different for everybody. But if you do have the option of being diverse, not only for attracting deer, because you don't know what's going to work each year, but then managing that soil, right? Like, I had a guy told me he's been just clover for 15, 20 years. And I said, that's not good either. You know, like, you don't want to do that. You know, you got a lot of nitrogen, you know, like, that needs to be rotated, and that's going to be the best thing you can do for your soil. So diversity for me is, it's a lot about the main part of it is more soil management than anything, but then also just, you don't know what the deer are going to key on that this year, and hopefully you have something that they want.
Right. Well, and so 3 points real quick, and then I'll give it to Dylan. Sorry, Dylan.
I'm enjoying this.
So diversity, I think, is super important. I only have 3 plots, and one's 1/8 of an acre, or one's 3/4 of an acre, and one's 1/8 of an acre. But they're all 3 be different. They're all going to be different, and the big one's going to be split in half, basically. That way, what happens if I have a nice deer that I want to shoot or target, but he's only coming to this one plot because he likes that plot. Whatever's in there he likes, but he doesn't need to go to the big one because he doesn't, you know. I mean, you'll cue in that he goes to this super early, but only comes to the clover plot by nightfall, you know. So diversity, them 3, even though it's just 3 plots, them 3 are going to be completely different, so that I know what they're looking for. We see where their pressure is. Second point was, we can feed right at our house here, and you can feed up to 2 gallons. And I feed a pellet that's got everything they could ever want in it, right? And it's easy to digest. It's easy, palatable. I'll still sit there and watch the bucket full of pellets, and the deer are eating on branches right 20 feet away because they just want to spread out. The best thing for them is in that bucket, and they trust me, they eat every bit of it. But that bucket's full of what they need and what they want. But yet 3 of the deer will stand on a tree and eat that nub off that branch and chew on that branch because they need diversity. They need different stuff throughout a day. Jason, what's your favorite food?
Perennial or annual?
No, I'm your food.
Oh, mine.
Steak, pizza.
It is. You'll laugh at this. Peanut butter pancakes with peanut butter on them.
Ooh.
Fine. Banana too?
No banana.
Okay. Well, then
Peanut butter, maple syrup, the whole bottle of maple syrup and peanut butter on my pancakes.
I'm on board with that.
Nice.
But if you ate that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 365 days a year, would you still like it?
I might, but no.
All right.
Because I lost 60 pounds. I was getting heavy. I saw in a video. I'm like, I gotta lose weight. So like every 3 or 4 days, I'll go and have peanut butter pancakes at Perkins, but it'll be my only meal for the day. Like I won't eat anything else. Like I'll treat myself, but I won't eat anything else. But I don't think I could eat it every day.
But so they want different stuff, and even if the best thing for them is right in front of their face, they're still gonna chew on a woody browse. They're still they're gonna eat a turnip. They're gonna eat some clover. They're gonna eat. They want different stuff throughout the year, but even on a daily basis. So if you were to plant just one thing through all of your food plots, they're still gonna go eat woody browse. They're still gonna travel and look for other things. So if you can give them the buffet, why not?
Yep.
And I don't remember what the third point was, but.
Well, I want to say one thing, because I do have a lot of guys that say that to me that consult and stuff. And I agree with you on your 1/8 acre plot. That's a smaller plot. I'd put it all in one thing. But your 1/4 acre, to me, when I go and look at a guy's property, I say I believe in diversity, but I'm a little bit different than what you said. I believe in diversity within when it's possible within every plot. And I'll explain the reasoning why I have that. But if I have a chance to put a 1/4 acre or bigger, I want to put an annual and perennial any chance that I get. And my reasoning is because what you said was, we don't know what that buck's going to be keying on at certain times. So say your clover plot's out on the edge of the property where it's his destination source or whatever. He's not going to get there till dark. But if you have a plot that's right there near the thick stuff, that's something that he wants at the time he wants, he's going to come there in daylight hours. To me, diversity ups your odds of getting that big buck in there in daylight hours when you want him in there, and that's why I told you, even with my clover and my fusion plots, if I plant a new one, I put oats in with it. And again, and I've seen where that's what the deer were eating at the particular time of year. They were coming and just whacking the oats, and things like that. I shot a big 150 inch and it was probably a little less than a 1/4 acre. And I had oats and that's what he was coming to eat. And it was near the bedding area. And man, I patterned him and I went in and I killed him. But 1/8 of an acre, you're right. That's really hard. But even in that 1/4 acre plot, man, I'd split that sucker and any chance you get when it's big enough, I would put it in sections and plant diversity, because I think you up your odds of getting that big guy there in the daylight hours when you want him. It's just my opinion, and it's what's worked well for me.
No, and even on the 1/8 acre plot, it's a blend of some sort. So it's not it's not just one clover. It's a blend of stuff, but yes, I open one bag up and that's what goes on the 1/8 acre. But your point is opening 2 separate different blends for food plot number 2 and then food plot 3 or if any chance you can get. So I totally agree with that.
Yep. Perfect though. Okay. All
right, Dylan, I'll shut up. I could go 6 hours, 10 hours on this. This is
good info. I'm just trying to figure out how to frost seed at my dad's, but I don't think we have that opportunity because we have not quite as much snow as Kyle. But there is no way to move snow out there. And as soon as the sun hits the soil, we're talking goopy muck that you can step down. You sink 8 inches before, and you hit frost, and you can't hardly walk out there.
Yeah, that's rough. I mean, I'd tell you guys, and again, this a little, we could still get snow. I mean, we've had snow in May here before, which is rare. But, again, I think what it comes down to me, is more of the seed soil contact. If you get a dry day and you get that snow and you can get that seed on that dirt before stuff's sprouting, I think you can be successful. So I know, Kyle, you talked about going and doing a whole crap load of work, right? Like removing all that snow. I mean, I'll be interested. I want to see how you did. And then I'd like you to try next year and say, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait till it melts. Because when it melts, there's not going to be any stuff growing yet. Like, you know, when it melts. So if you can get in there when it's down to an inch or whatever and seed that, I think you'd be good. I do. I mean, it would be interesting to hear and might save you a ton of work, but I want you to do it your way this year. See how it goes, and then maybe try it the next year, because like I said before, I believe, you know, for both of you guys, if you can find that sweet spot when that snow gets down to about, you know, an inch and get in there and seed it, I think you could still be really successful. So
the only thing I think I'm gaining from all of this work that I'm going to do, or did, past tense, is just extending the growing season, extending the green up.
But I guess my question on that would be, is if there's still snow on the ground, there's nothing growing yet anyway, right? I mean, for the most part.
For the most part, like, yeah, you are.
Yeah,
you are correct.
you know,
the soil temperature still
is too low to germinate. So that's why I'm like, man, just wait till that sucker melts, at least way down, instead of killing yourself. But no, I want you to go do it because I want to see how it goes for you. But, you know, just some of my experience where people have really got hung up with, I mean, I got to get out there at a certain time. I've done it really late before when the freeze and thaw was done. And it was just, but you're right, like Dylan, what you said too is, if you don't get it and it's goopy, but hopefully you still have a night where it freezes and you get out there first thing in the morning. Don't go out in the middle of the day, you know, get there first thing in the morning where it's still froze and seed that. You know, I think you could be just as successful in doing it that way. That's my opinion.
Yep.
No, well, I'll give it a shot. I'll see if I can't find Dad's got a bunch of plots either inside or outside his, you know, deer farm, but finding one that doesn't have corn or something, you know, dead on it from last year is going to be the tricky part.
Yeah, sure.
But
yep.
I'll give it a shot. I think it could be fun. Cool. It'd be fun to see if it works out there because he's got what's locally called cold bottom soil. So, you know, normally up here and probably down there, maybe down there too, they say, you know, your corn's going to be good if it's knee high by 4th of July. Well, if he plants it to be knee high by 4th of July, nothing grows. Normally it's knee high by like August 3rd.
Okay.
Yeah. It's pretty bad. Pretty bad on some of my dad's pieces, but it'd be fun to see.
Said, you know, my way, maybe it's different. You know, I'm giving you guys what my experience is here in Northwest Michigan. It may not work for you. You know, it's a little bit different. But you know, like I said, I've done it late when the freezing and thawing was gone, and it was just about getting that seed on the ground before the weeds start. You know, catching that small window that you have before that warm up and it starts greening up. You know, like I think he could still be successful. So
I'm gonna give it a shot. I think it could be fun.
Cool. And it is awesome when it works out because you do all this work for food plots, right? You're spraying, you're disking, you got the tractor in there. Literally, this is you go out. You're literally done in 5 minutes, right? Like it's like and then it grows like hot damn, man. Like I have to do this all the time.
Yeah. Absolutely, and it's all about putting feed out for the deer, especially. You know, in Kyle's situation, my situation is not quite the same. We got a lot of ag around, but when there's no food source, it's hard on your fawns. It's hard on your does, you know, having good, healthy fawns. It's hard on your buck's antler growth. And it just makes everything so much harder when all they can eat is underbrush. Yep, if they can even find that. Sure. So that's something we push a lot. Feed your deer. Feed as much as you can when you can. But while we got you here, we're kind of narrowing down on time, but I got a couple of questions that always intrigues me when we get somebody on from out of state. So you shot a few really nice bucks on your land, but what management practices do you implement as a landowner as far as trying to get your bucks to be big, mature bucks?
Okay. So the first one's really easy, and I think this is applicable everywhere. Don't shoot the 2.5 and 3.5 year olds.
Thank you. Why does nobody listen when we say it?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I have guys all the time every year. I'm going to hold out. I can't. I mean, if you saw some of my videos of some of the bucks I passed this year, because I knew I had a big one. I mean, people were flipping out, right? And it's like, you're not going to shoot the big one if you keep shooting the smaller ones, and they're not going to get big if you keep shooting them when they're 2.5, 3.5 years old. So I try not to, how do I say this? I don't go out there and bash other hunters. I always say, shoot what makes you happy, but then don't complain, right? If you and your whole family is going out and whacking every 2.5-year-old 8-point, and then you're complaining that that's all you're shooting, and I don't want to hear it, right? You know, and if you ask me, like you did, I'll give my opinion. If you ask me and a guy asks me like, hey, what do I need to do to shoot big mature deer? Well, don't shoot the little one. Don't, and they're not little ones, because some guys, that's a trophy to them, but don't shoot the 2.5 and 3.5-year-old deer. And telling somebody in Pennsylvania not to shoot a 3.5-year-old deer, that doesn't go over real well. You know, like, what do you mean? Well, the neighbor will get him. Well, you know, that's the way that it goes, you know, and, you know, he's never going to have a chance if you're going to whack him, and you're never going to have a chance to shoot a really big one. You might get lucky, right? You know, and it's the first deer that came out one year, but you got to let those, ones grow. I think that's first and foremost. And Pennsylvania, you know, I hunt Pennsylvania, Ohio, Kentucky. And it's interesting, from Pennsylvania finally put in an antler restriction, which has helped immensely. Which is really good. You can only shoot one buck in Pennsylvania. Ohio and Kentucky, they do a good job of managing their buck to doe ratio. Pennsylvania really struggles with that. I'll talk a little bit about that, you know, next, unless you wanted to anybody want to say anything about not shooting the little ones before I moved on to my next point in management, Kyle?
Wisconsin, I think Minnesota struggle with that same 2.5, 3.5, shoot them all. If it's brown, it's down. Neighbor's going to shoot it if I don't. Like, we struggle with that management also. Yeah. But something I implemented on my land as a personal rule is each year the deer has to generally get bigger until I'm shooting 5.5-year-old deer. So I shot a 100-inch 2-year-old. And I'm like, hey, don't shoot 2-year-olds because you're never going to get them bigger. But I also want to have a successful year. I want to have a good year, tag out. I want that success each year. But my personal setup or my personal goal is every year the deer gets bigger. So if a deer comes in that is about the same size as last year's, he's going to get the pass. And hopefully that generally gets the age up there. Once I'm shooting 5.5-year-old deer, if I ever get to that point, then the antler size, and, you know, once they're 5.5, all right, now it's kind of just have fun. But we can do 2 bucks, one with the rifle, one with the bow. So that's just what I'm doing on mine. As far as limiting my age class.
Yeah. And a lot of guys don't even know how, like in Pennsylvania, if I told them, you know, and I'll be honest, I'll shoot a 4.5. You know, that's kind of my goal in Pennsylvania. That's a big buck. The buck I shot this year was a 5.5-year-old deer, but I would have pasted him last year if I had the chance. But fortunately I didn't. So he made it through, and he grew about 20 inches from his shed too. But, you know, here, you know, just telling people, you know, for me, I'll shoot a 120-inch 4.5-year-old deer. It's more about the age to me than it is even the rack. You know, we all like a big rack and stuff, but if I saw a 140-inch 3.5-year-old, I'm gonna let him go. You know, I'll shoot a 120-inch 4.5 or 5.5-year-old deer over that all day long. And that's just kind of the evolution of a hunter, right? You know, and you just know when you start chasing that age class of a buck, I mean, you're matching wits with the smartest animal in the woods at that point. You know, he didn't get to 4.5 or 5.5 in Pennsylvania by not being smart, you know? And so I'd agree with you on all those points. So.
Yeah, it's super frustrating up here because 90% of the bucks in the state of Minnesota are 2.5 and under. And it's always, it's got antlers, shoot it. If it's brown, it's down. You can't eat the antlers. Antlers don't make good chili. Well, you get a lot more meat off a big deer than a small deer.
Yeah, but. And people that say that, I mean, I don't argue with them because it's like, oh, you can't eat the antlers. I shot it for the meat. Well, whack a doe. You can get 6 doe tags, right? Like, I mean, do we really need to shoot a 1.5, 2.5-year-old 6-point? That just to say, you know. But again, like, we as hunters, we rip each other apart, and I think it's more of a state legislature issue that you know, putting antler restrictions in helps. You know, managing that doe buck ratio, you know, hunter education on those kinds of things certainly helps, because obviously some states do it a lot better than other states. And Minnesota is similar to Pennsylvania and New York. I mean, man, guys are just, I want to get something with a horn on it. It's like, good grief, you know. And so anyway, I don't belittle my fellow hunter, because as long as they're obeying the law and doing what they said. Now, if they whine and complain to me, then I let them know. But I'm not going to go. You were happy shooting that buck. But one thing I hate, and they see it in social media, well, I thought he was bigger. Well, then, man, you weren't, you know, like, why did you shoot him, right? Like, if I don't care. You better be pumped. You better tell me that your leg was shaking when you shot that deer, or I'm going to have an issue with it then, right? Why did you need to shoot him then? Let him go. But again, we can talk about that kind of stuff all day. But you know, I guess unless you had anything else, I'll talk a little bit about my doe management practices. Number 2. So we were talking management, and we talked a little bit about this before the show. And I get that question all the time here in the Northeast. And I'm a firm believer. One year I went into my property and we shot like 15 does, right? And I'm like, okay, we're going to try this. I think there were more does the next year. I mean, we had the food, and I think until the state, right? Like Pennsylvania has a lot of issues right now because there's a lot of private ground, right? Everybody piles up. There's nothing left on the public land, and the private ground, people aren't shooting enough, right? And that's where all the food is too. So it's just holding these massive deer herds until they figure out some way to get that in check. For me to go in there and just, I'm burning stands, right? I'm burning plots, whacking does left and right, trying to get, and it was like a never ending battle. So when I consult with most guys, that's one of the biggest questions I get: how many does should I take? For me, I don't think I'd worry about it. Like, take what you want, hunt the plots smart, hunt the ones that have little impact on the property where you can take does. Mm-hmm. Don't take a doe back in your rut plot where, next to the bedding area. Be smart about it. But man, take what you need for food, but to say, hey, you need to shoot, you have 100 acres and you need to shoot 14 does off here. Well, good luck, because if you got the food, they're just going to move in then the next year. Again, my personal opinion on it, but that's kind of where I'm at just in that. I think it's more of a statewide approach that they have to come up with of managing those herds and keeping them in check.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And it sounds like Pennsylvania's not too keen on, from a state level, like Minnesota and Wisconsin. It's like, well, you guys are kind of on your own. Good luck, have fun.
Yeah.
I mean, you do have an APR, which is huge. I have a love-hate relationship with them. I hate that if a young buck qualifies for an APR, he gets shot. Because
when you're saying APR, antler restriction.
Yeah, antler point restriction.
Oh, yeah. Okay, all right. Yeah. I never heard that said that way before. All right.
Different terminology in different states, but so like it'll be 4 points on one side, right? Is typical what we see here, and then you get a yearling 8-pointer. Well, it's got 4 points on one side, but it's a year and a half old, and you just shot the best genetic deer on your property.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
I will say this. I will say this about it though. It's helped immensely here because, I don't know, are high power rifles legal in Minnesota?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So same in Pennsylvania. And before it was, you saw an antler, you just shot and killed it, and then you would sort it out later. You get a deer running across the field now, and it has to have 3 up top and a brow tine. It's real hard putting a brow tine on an 8-point when they're running across the field, right?
Oh, for sure.
So it's you're right 100%. In last year, in my area, it's 4 on one side, and I had a 5.5-year-old 6. He just didn't have brow tines. He was a stud. I mean, a stud, and he needed to be shot. But I mean, you couldn't. So there it comes, and that's rare, right? It definitely, the benefits of it definitely outweigh the negatives and help, because since it's been in, me personally, I've been seeing and shooting big deer consistently. Mm-hmm. That wasn't the case, like it just wasn't before. So they definitely help. Is it perfect? No, but it definitely helps.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great thing to implement across the state of Minnesota, but you'll never get it to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, that stinks.
In one of our podcasts, me and Dylan played, what was it, DNR commissioner?
Yeah. What would we do if we were commissioner of our DNR or Fish and Wildlife?
We had some crazy ideas. I had an antler restriction for 3 years, and then after that it gets taken away and blah, blah, blah. And we played that game. And it was a really fun podcast to dream about how we would manage our deer herd. But what do you think of Pennsylvania as far as they did a antler restriction? What about their management practices? Is there anything you really dislike or do like?
I don't want to bash crossbows. I'm an archery guy, I'm a bow guy, and crossbows are really big, and I feel overall it's good for the hunting industry because it's getting more people involved. So I don't want to bash my fellow hunters. Crossbows are legal the whole archery season. I'd like to see them have a week or two in archery, just because I'm afraid of archery season going away. It's just easier for kids to pick up a crossbow, and that's just my own selfish reasons. I think we also know, I don't know if you guys agree, but shooting a bow requires a lot of work, requires a lot of practice. I can pick a crossbow up, shoot it once, and go out and kill a deer at 60, 70 yards, just no problem, So it's more of I don't want to see the sport of archery go away, and that's one of my fears. So I'd like to see that. That's a big one for me, kind of. But I never bash my crossbow hunter. I'm like, hey, that's between me and the state of Pennsylvania, and that's where I'll take that to. We have some things, as far as deer. The biggest issue, and I don't know what the solution is. Like I said, they look at each county and they give doe tags based on the deer population. I live in a high deer density, but most all my county is private land, and it's owned by a family. They're not going to shoot the amount of does that they need to shoot off their property. So I don't know what the solution is to do with that, because if the private landowners say, well, I'm not shooting that many deer, what are you going to do? Right. So I don't know what the solution is. Now, the thing I do believe is, like, I have some leases. Like, I'd love to see them say, hey, on these leases, we're going to give you a whole bunch of tags, right? Like, you can have, because I have a bunch of ground, I can only shoot so many does. But like, man, I might go on this particular lease, but they do it for landowners that have farm. But unless you have farmland, you can't get extra doe tags or anything like that. So I think if they came out and said, hey, you own, 250 acres, we're going to give you, 14 doe tags this year. We encourage you to shoot that many. I don't know the answer exactly, but I know the big issue is private land. They're giving out all these tags, but the majority of hunters are on public land, and they're getting waylaid. And then on private, that's just where all the deer are at, and it's just way overpopulated.
I can tell you what Minnesota's solution would be.
What?
Import wolves. That's what they did.
It's no good.
Yeah.
I do not want that in Pennsylvania at all.
We got guys who used to be able to see 20, 30 deer a sit. They had good deer activity, and now they're lucky they see two deer all season. They'll see more wolves than they see all season.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I can't imagine. I know in Wisconsin, I've hunted near, is it Portage? You guys know where Portage is, Wisconsin? Yep. The Dells. I've hunted down there numerous times, had some great hunts. But he complains about I can't imagine having wolves. I mean, we got coyotes, but that's nothing like wolves. So.
No, not at all. Yeah. But
I will tell you one of my big gripes, and this one I won't, it's such a hot topic. There's two things. The trespassing laws in Pennsylvania are absolutely asinine. I mean, you got to have purple paint on the trees, posted signs on every trees. Like I know in Wisconsin it's a $2,000 fine, right? Like, you get caught in something, you don't have to post. So we deal with trespassing all the time, and you didn't have that side marked well enough, and they get a warning, right? And then if you can, now cell cams have been tremendously beneficial. I've caught a bunch of guys, but like the trespassing laws in Pennsylvania are just absolutely atrocious. Like, they drive me bonkers. It's my land. What's the difference in him going on my land or going in my house, right? It's private property. Like, you just can't do, and it's because it's always been that way, right? And change is hard. Nobody wants to change. And the other big thing that really leads into is we have, I work all year long in creating sanctuaries, right? Creating sanctuaries for these deer, dog hunters. Dog hunt, coyote dogs, rabbit dogs, oh, my dog went over there, it's like, and it's just like, man, you got to go somewhere where you can't worry about, they'll hunt on a 5-acre piece right beside my ground, knowing that their dogs are going to go over there. Yep. And they can go get them. And it's frustrating and I don't know what the answer, because I feel bad for those guys, right? Like, because, they love, dog hunters are passionate. And I understand. I used to rabbit hunt, and I loved it too. But times are just different. It's like, hey, I know that's great rabbit territory, but you got to go game lands. There's 1 million acres of game lands, like, for you to run your dogs. I know you want to do it here because there's lots of rabbits, but you got to keep in mind, I work hard all year long to manage this, to leave sanctuaries for the deer. You can't come in there with 8 dogs and 14 guys that then cruise through, and it just ruined everything that I've worked so hard for. So there's things like that in Pennsylvania that just drive me bonkers. So,
So I've hunted coyotes with hounds quite a bit when I was younger. We did it for 4 or 5 years, and it's a blast. But the technology is so advanced. You have GPS collars. It's so simple to not let your dog onto somebody else's piece. Your dog's going that way, beep, beep, beep on the collar, and the dog turns and runs back to you. There's no excuse anymore for that.
Yeah. And it's hard because I know guys who are passionate dog hunters, and it's getting harder and harder for them, right? There's less and less area. But I mean, at the same time, I'm trying to make a living. I'm trying to do things on my ground to manage it a certain way. And I'm sorry, but like, you're needs and wants don't outweigh mine. And that's just how it is. And, you know, like I said, we got 1 million acres of public ground. You got to go there and run your dogs where you don't have to worry about them going across,
Property
unless it's a
lines.
big piece of public or private that you have permission. But yeah, man, it's hard and it tears hunters apart and it sucks, and I think we've all seen that where, I used to be able to go hunt wherever I wanted, right? I'd grab my gun after school and run up over the hill. There was nothing was posted. It's just different now, and it's just not the way that it was. So
yeah.
And as far as like running dogs and coyotes and bobcats, and I don't know what the answer is, but you're responsible for your dogs. And I agree with you. It's my property. I pay taxes on it. My name's on it. Whether it's dogs or just purely trespassers, everybody has Onyx, GPS, a plat book. You should be confident on where you're standing.
Yeah.
Now, if you're my neighbor and you're 10 feet off the property line, we might have rawr, 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 get off my land. But that's different than you walking through my 94 acres, which it's there. Like you should be aware of where you're standing at that point. And the fines are. I don't even know what the trespassing fines are, but I know during this last rifle season, I had boat tracks through my property. They would pull up to where you can park at my property off the highway, and they walked in. And I'm like, what are you doing? And, walking straight towards the sanctuary, another 100 yards, they were going to punch through my bedding area. And I'm like, get out, get out of here. What are you doing? So, it is.
Minnesota sounds like it's a little easier on the trespass law. Like, I don't know what the fine is, but last time I checked, if you put one sign up on your piece, the whole piece is posted.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, I'm to the point like Wisconsin, you don't even have to post. Unless you have permission to be on their property, then that's it. It's as easy. Let's be done with the purple paint, the posted signs, all of it. Just like you said, you got Onyx, you got Hunt Stand, you got whatever it is, Hunt Wise. Like you can see the lines. If you don't know where you're at, then get out of there. That's just how it is, And I think it'll eventually catch up because enough people are getting frustrated and dealing with stuff, and it is unfortunate, but it's just different now. Like you said, we work hard at doing this stuff. You just can't come strolling through here. It's all the hard work I did was out the door.
Right.
Yeah. But
anything else, Dylan?
We're kind of running out of time to start anything big and exciting. We're just over an hour here, which is always good. But Jason, if you got anything you want to plug, I know you got your Field Days podcast and your Wired Outdoors YouTube channel. And then Kyle whispered to me a little bit about an All-In documentary, if you want to speak on any of that.
Yeah, so I shot a big buck this year in PA. Going to be the second biggest typical buck shot in my county. Ended up scoring 165 inches. Just chased him for 2 years. It was a heck of a story. Ended up hitting him the first day of archery season. Didn't get him. Sat 70 times for him through archery season. Morning, night. Ended up killing him the third day of rifle season. But I had a documentary company approach me, and I've been producing outdoor videos for 15 years with Wired Outdoors. But our videos are hello and welcome, and here's what we're doing. We kill a deer, we recover it, streaming videos, 10, 15 minutes at most. And they said, hey, this is a heck of a story, and would you like to do a documentary? And I'm like, well, yeah, man, if I'm ever going to do it, it's going to be this buck. So it's quite an experience. We did a showing of it, and the way it was really set up, we set it up. I started Wired Outdoors. I left a great job. I was making 6 figures. I was the director of marketing and strategic planning in the health system. My wife was 8.5 months pregnant. We just built a new house. I went home. I said, honey, I'm going to hunt for a living. We're moving. And this was at the height of when everybody was starting a TV show, right? Everybody's going to be the next Michael Waddell and all this. And that wasn't my goal, but I'm like, man, if I can hunt for a living, I'm sure as heck I'm going to roll the dice. Left a great job. And it sucked. 4 years, I didn't make a dime. I mean, I struggled, and we almost declared bankruptcy. And we kind of go through that story, and my wife, she's great in it. She tells what a horrible person I was for making her leave her family and follow my dreams. But, 4 years into it, things just started to roll, and I'm fortunate. I have the best sponsors in the industry. I have Matthews, Rage, Hunter Safety System, Whitetail Institute, Hui Man, just I got the best in the industry. They're top of line category, and it just kind of started to flow. So it's kind of a two-part. We talk about that, but then really how that stubborn persistence in my business life paid off with this buck, because I wouldn't quit on him, man. I hunted and I hunted and I hunted and I finally got him. So it's been getting great reviews. We had a private showing of it to about 120 people the other night, and it's going to be released. We're talking to, we're not sure. It's at minimum going to be on the Wired Outdoors Roku channel. We have a Roku channel and our YouTube channel, but we're also talking to some other platforms to see where all we can get it and stuff. But I'm excited about it. It's an hour and 15 minutes long, and it's a documentary. It's not like your typical hunting show. And I think my goal too, when I made it, was that any woman who didn't hunt would sit down and watch it from the beginning to the end. And based on the reviews, I just posted a post on my personal page the other day, just taking some of the snippets of reviews that's kind of come out. I talked about housewives who never hunted were bawling their eyes out when I shot the deer and things like that. So it's pretty emotional, but it's I'm excited about it. I appreciate you guys let me plug it too, but it's going to be coming out. It's probably going to be coming out in October sometime, and we'll be making an announcement in the summer what platforms it's going to be on and all that good stuff. But really excited about it. Something different, and I hope when you guys see it, you like it too.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. I look forward to watching it.
Yep. I'm excited, and a great thing about it is me and my wife can sit down. She is not a hunter. She lets me hang the deer on the wall, but she's helped me gut deer, but she has her limits. But it sounds like something that she would enjoy watching too. So I look forward to that. And if it comes out in October, it'll be right about the time Dylan finishes our deer hunts from this last year, and we'll be able to post them. So,
you gotta mail me one of them first. You still got to mail that to me, and I should just be really quick now and get it done this week, so that it's done before this podcast gets posted.
Well, I'll let you guys work that out amongst yourselves.
We'll sign off before we get into that.
Yeah.
But Jason, seriously, thank you for joining this little podcast that has a couple followers on YouTube and 2,000 followers on Facebook. I greatly appreciate you saying yes to joining us, and I could pick your brain for 5 days straight. But but also thank you for your Field Days podcast. Anybody that wants to hear Jason talk more about this stuff with more experts, not just me and Dylan yahoos. I don't even know how many episodes you have. 50 episodes?
Yeah, we're in the fourth season, and we do 14 a year. So what's 14 times 3? So so whatever that is, too much math for me.
But thank you for that. It passes the time at work for me to listen to that and learn. So a lot of this stuff that we talked about tonight, I'm learning from your podcast. And then I've been catching up on the Wired Outdoors. I just seen that it has the tabs for 15 seasons. So there's a ton of content. If anybody that's listening to ours wants to get over there and hasn't already, get over there and look at everything Jason's done, and along with in October at some point the All In documentary. I'm super excited for that. And again, thank you for joining our little podcast. It's been a pleasure. So
I had a great time. I appreciate you guys having me. We'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, you have an open invitation to join us anytime you'd like. So
all right. Well, you guys just let me know. So let me know.
Sounds great. I'm going to do our little outro here, and then we'll chat for a few more minutes before you hang up. So, you guys heard it here first. You can, well, not first, but you heard it here. You can find Jason Say on his Field Days podcast, soon his All In documentary, Wired Outdoors on YouTube and Facebook, and you got that great big Facebook group. And what was that again?
It was Food Plots for Whitetail.
Food Plots for Whitetail on Facebook. You can find Lessons of the Woods every Friday at 7 p.m. Central Time on YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify, and just about anywhere else podcasts are. And we'll see you guys next time.